All right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a recorded event, so we will share that link later on. My name is Tracy McIntyre. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Cooperative Development Center and Council of Co-ops. I am extremely honored to introduce the guest today, Doug O'Brien, President and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA, and Gerry Singleton, CEO of the Montana Credit Unions. Lindsay will be monitoring the chat and keeping us posted. If you do have any questions, I think we want this to be very fluid. As you will see between Gerry, Doug, and I, we'll kind of go back and forth. But please feel free to use that chat and we'll make sure that all of your questions are answered as they come along. So, I'm already ahead of schedule. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, why co-ops matter, and giving just kind of some national and historical context. We're going to be, the bulk of it is around those 7 principles. And then we are going to talk about the ecosystems that create the cooperative community and the International Year of Cooperatives. So just real briefly, as I know some of you guys are pretty new to the cooperative world, we wanted to just show what a co-op is. And at the end of the day, the International Cooperative Association has it as an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. For us, it's when people come together to fit a need and come up with a solution locally. And they are always owned and benefited. The members always own, and they are the ones that benefit it. It is a democratically controlled process. And then we also just wanted to briefly note that though cooperatives are a global form of business, they are state chartered. And some of the key aspects is that equity comes from members. The control is always by the elected members of the board of directors. Taxes can be a little different, so you do want to work with your tax accountant, people. Earnings, they are shared between the members. And then we do find that cooperatives are usually very perpetual in existence. We have some here in Montana that date back before the 1900s that are still in operation. So we know that they have lasting impact. So Doug, you want to kind of tell us why co-ops matter?
Yeah, absolutely. Tracy, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being part of this conversation. And I'm Doug O'Brien. The National Cooperative Business Association is the umbrella group for all kinds of co-ops. And we're going to be talking about those co-ops in a little bit and a little bit more about NCBA. Tracy's, I'm lucky enough to have Tracy on my board. Co-ops have been around for a while. In fact, you could even argue that they've been around for a long, long time because people have always found ways to work together to solve problems, whether that's in Northern Europe is sort of the European story that we tell. Of course, Native Americans, they had a lot of cooperative solutions, the African continent, across the world. But in 1844, a group of what are called the co-op pioneers, there were a bunch of small business people, weavers at that time in England, in Rochdale. They came together to actually, they needed to get food affordably and safely. At that time, food could have a lot of unsafe things about it, and they figured out how to come together in a buying group, and they set up a bunch of rules that evolved into principles that we're going to talk about in a little bit and have evolved. And as Tracy said, co-ops have been used to solve problems that either a nonprofit, government, or other private businesses are not solving for people. And that can be in rural places, it can be in urban places. And today, cooperatives are really significant in the United States. They solve access issues for rural people for electricity and broadband. They make sure that farmers have access to markets. They ensure that families from every type of demographic are able to have good financial solutions. And what we're always looking for is how co-ops can solve kind of that next issue, which maybe we'll have some time to talk about in just a little bit. Next slide. We talk about the co-op difference. There's a lot of ways to talk about it, but here's just 3 things that we really recognize. Co-ops provide access to critical markets and affordable, high-quality services. I gave that example of electricity. In 1930, only 10% of farm families had access to electricity when 90% of families in cities did. You know, boil it down, people started creating cooperatives. There was some really good federal policy around that to help people form cooperatives, electric cooperatives, and within a generation, 90% of farm families had access to electricity. That's solving the problem, making sure that people have access to a critical need or service. Great thing about cooperatives, they're a business because they're made up of the people who use the business. That means most of the time they're in the community. That means that cooperative is going to serve the best interests and the priorities of that community. Another great thing about cooperatives is that if there is a profit in that business, it goes to the members. The members are all in the community, so all that money stays in the community. So they're a great local economic development strategy as well. Next slide.
Doug, if I could just jump in real quick on that.
Please do.
Comment that you just mentioned. I was with one of our credit unions yesterday evening. It was with the executive team and the board, and they started talking about the difference that they're making in their communities. They've intentionally plugged into different community organizations, community groups, and their membership to provide all kinds of services. And what was interesting about the meeting was they started brainstorming the different community organizations and others that they support. And the board, I've never seen a board so engaged, and they got animated, and they were talking. And then I was typing as fast as I could as they were sharing all of the ways they're involved in their community. And then they all paused and they stopped and they looked up at the screen with that list. And they had never taken that opportunity to kind of put the list together. They blew themselves away thinking about, they're like, we're a small credit union and we're having a mighty impact in our communities, and our members notice and see it. So it was really fun to see, and it's timely because this just happened yesterday evening with one of our credit unions here in the state.
That's a great example. Great example, Gary. Next slide.
Maybe. Hold
Maybe.
on. Maybe. There we go. I don't know why it wouldn't let me do that. So
yeah, we just talked about the impact that co-ops make in it on that local community. And that, of course, to individuals, that's what really hits home, literally. But just a few data points on co-ops in the United States and across the world. There's about 64,000 co-op establishments. In fact, 1 in 3 people are members of cooperatives. The lion's share are credit unions, which are consumer financial cooperatives. People and consumers in their households, they own and control their own financial institution. There's about 140 million credit union memberships. Maybe they represent, some people like me belong to more than one credit union, so maybe it's 120 million people. Worldwide, 3 million people, or 3 million co-ops, and over 1 billion people are members of cooperatives across the world. So, it's a big deal in Montana, and Montana is part of a much larger community of co-ops. Next slide.
And we can just touch on that real quickly is these are our 2022 impact numbers, but about 24, actually it's over 24, is pushing 25,000 jobs are related directly from our cooperative community. And if we put all of our co-ops together, all of the ag, telecoms, credit unions, all of the ones that are emerging, it's a $7.1 billion impact, which makes us one of the larger industries in the state. And then directly benefiting our local communities, that dollar that we get to bring home, about 1.6 billion in family incomes. And then Lindsay and I actually get the chance to go and spend a day with youth across central Montana, and we created this just to show them. We also know that co-ops in Montana are actually usually paying higher than the average wage. So those are just a few things a little bit closer into Montana that we know about.
Tracy, putting a credit union lens on, if I could real quick, in Montana.
Yes,
and Doug, when you mentioned the rural communities and access to electricity as an example early in the day, in Montana, we have 5 to 7 kind of metro areas around the state. Credit unions are in 147 communities across the state. So if you think, and that just, it blows me away when I think about some of those communities and how teeny tiny they are in very rural and remote parts of the state. And there's a credit union presence there specifically to serve those members and those communities. So 147 of our Montana communities directly have a presence. And obviously with online and digital and everything else, it's all the way across the state.
Yeah. And we crisscross the state all the time, as you know, Gary, and
Mhm.
we've often find like we'll ask people like, do you belong to a credit union or do you belong to a cooperative? And that is a credit union, and credit unions are cooperatives. And we're asking, it's very few areas that we've found in any of the states that doesn't have some form of a co-op, whether it's an ag supply store, it's their convenience store that the ag supply store runs, is a credit union. They're served by electricity or an electric credit union, or gosh, I can't speak today, an electric cooperative. Um, it's just, I don't think there's a county in the state that doesn't have some form of a cooperative on it. And Montana's huge. And
Mhm.
so it's just really showcasing that we are kind of a backbone to a lot of our society.
Mhm.
So kind of moving us along, because this is what we talk about. And so, Doug, would you maybe give just an overview of what these 7 guiding principles are? And then we can maybe go through each one and talk a little bit more about how are we seeing them both here in Montana and more on the national level playing out.
Sure. Yeah. Some of my favorite topics. Tracy, just so I'm clear, would you like me to go through all 7 and then we do some examples, or do you want to do it kind of example by principle? Do whatever way you want.
Why don't we do it just like one principle and some examples and just get a
That
good
makes sense.
dialogue going?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So these 7 cooperative principles, they are universally across the world understood as, these are the principles of these really special kinds of businesses. And these principles show up in a lot of different ways. One way is in law, in both state law and federal law. So many of these principles are actually reflected in law, but not all of them necessarily, and in kind of different ways. Other ways that the principles show up are in the governance documents, in the ways that these co-ops, practice. But these are generally, if you're a co-op, you're following, most or all of these principles, or at least aspiring to do it. First one is a really important one, voluntary and open membership. So a co-op it doesn't discriminate based on gender or race or creed, etc. So if the co-op exists, then people can join it, and it's voluntary. Nobody can force you to be part of a co-op. You get to choose to be part of that co-op. Um, an example that sort of refines it to some degree, and Gary could probably talk to it, is credit unions. Historically, they had a field of membership, and to some degree, many of them still do. And that means if you were employees of certain, of a certain big employer, a lot of times they're more and more, I think it's geographic. So if you're in a geographic area, and it might be the whole state, then you have an opportunity to be part of that credit union. Now, Gary, you might want to jump in to talk about what's that look like in Montana.
Yeah, absolutely. And you described it exactly well. In Montana, we have those exact examples. So it's within the field of membership. Oftentimes it's geographic in Montana. Most often it's geographic, and it's live, work, or worship is kind of the taglines or the phrases: live, work, or worship within that geographic region. Some of them are county based. Many of our credit unions are county based, so they serve specific counties, generally adjacent to one another in a geographic area. There are some statewide credit unions as well. And then the other thing that's important when you mention voluntary and open is we also use the phrase once a member, always a member, right? So when you join that credit union, if you move away from that geographic area and you're a member, you are still able to maintain your membership. So you're not kicked out of the club, so to speak. You're still able to be part of that credit union. And many people choose because they have such a local connection and a powerful relationship with that local credit union that they keep it for life, right? And we have kids who are one of the first things the parents do when the kid is born is open a credit union account for them. So that's pretty powerful.
I got an account for all of my kids, and I'm a member of more than one credit union because real candidly, because when it's time to do a big purchase, I have an opportunity to to work with different financial and credit unions. Just by the way, credit unions, by their very nature of being owned and controlled by the people, credit unions, and there's really good literature on this. If you're borrowing money, that it's going to be cheaper borrowing it from a credit union. If you're saving money, you're going to get better interest,
Yep.
because it all stays within. It's not being leaked out. So I'll jump to that next one. Democratic member control. This is the what that means is it's one person, one vote for the board. And then the board hires the executive, and the executive runs the staff. Is the typical way. But every member has one vote for those board members. So it varies some. It can vary a little bit for big co-ops that might go by district, for some of the bigger ag co-ops, etc. But that notion of one person, one vote is how that democratic member control shows up. I don't know if Gary or Tracy, you want to comment on that one.
We've actually just saw this in action on a couple projects. So in the co-op development world, we really are building a lot of these principles in from the start. And we just finished incorporating the Montana Women's Finance Investment Co-op, which is an incredible feat. It's statewide. We're really happy about it. They had their initial board meeting, and they came and, in that, well, not board meeting, their initial membership meeting. And that's when they approved their bylaws. And that discussion was so robust. All of these, it was mostly, well, right now it's all women, but men are welcome. So, right, open and voluntary membership. But they had these women coming that had read their bylaws, had questions, and this whole democratic process just played out right in front of us in their first meeting, and then they elected their board. It was a really incredible moment to see, and just having that dialogue on like, what does this mean? Is this what we want? And having that back and forth and having a voice, I think, is really what's unique and sets us apart.
Yeah.
I'll add a quick comment. So by the way, Trace, I am a member of that co-op too. So that's cool.
He was our token male to start.
Yeah.
We have more males now, though, Gary.
Yeah, that's great.
One.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I will say, I will encourage those of us on the call who are members of co-ops. One of the things that's really cool, Tracy, you mentioned with the Women's Finance Co-op and the historic moment that was. Some of our co-ops go back, Doug, you said 100 years and even more than that in our country. So I challenge you all to go back and look at the history of how your co-op was formed, whatever it is, whether it's electric, ag, credit union, whatever it is. Those minutes, you can access those minutes, the early days. You see that it might have started in a shoebox in somebody's house, and the farmers were coming together and pooling their funds to do it. It brings the chills on, right, when you read some of those things. And we have credit unions and co-ops around the world today being formed in exactly the same way, and 2025, right? So it's really cool to see that historical perspective, and then tell somebody else about it when you learn it.
Absolutely. Number 3, members' economic participation. That means that members actually they invest in the co-op. Typically there's an upfront investment. I'm a member of our local food co-op. You put $100 in to become a member, and then typically we get 10% in patronage at the end of that. So if we buy, $2,000 worth of groceries, we're going to get $200 back at the end. I mean, there's co-ops that I think that this third principle really makes it clear that these are not nonprofits. Some do describe themselves as their reason that it's not for profit, but it's not a nonprofit. It's a business that's bringing a business solution. And so that economic participation is really important. So Gary or Tracy, anything on that one?
Well, I think, go ahead, Gary.
Go ahead,
Do you want to go forth? We just visited one of our ag co-ops the other day, and I'm not going to get this number correct, but they've been around for a while. It was a merger of 2 co-ops, South Central Montana, and they just did a return on their dividends, and that's from the members that were participating, and they were able to retire some of that patronage, and they gave out substantial money back. I want to say, and this is where I'm being recorded, but don't quote me, it was like $2 million back into the local economy, back to their members, because the members participated in it. But it's even beyond, I think, that dividend and patronage that we can see in some co-ops co-ops, like you said, Doug. Will we see that in like a housing co-op? Maybe, maybe not. But the trade-off sometimes is maybe that you are investing your money for the social impact and the need that you are addressing, right? If it's housing, if it's childcare, there's different ways that the members' economic participation comes back to them, whether it's saving a slot for a childcare, or we have a lot of food hubs, a lot of food development work happening here. It will be years before those guys actually see patronage and dividends out, but they're bringing that they're meeting that need first for their members. And then their members are going to be the ones that are using it, keeping that revolving door going through.
That's great. The comment I would make, a couple of comments actually, if I may, is as Tracy's done a wonderful job these last few years of bringing the co-op sectors together in Montana. And it's interesting, we're a co-op. So these 7 cooperative principles are the foundation of our connection. That's how we're related to one another. And there's also a lot of nuances, a lot of differences in how we do different things. And this is one that's been a wonderful learning about some of the other co-ops beyond credit unions, which is my world, on how the economic member participation works. So that's one comment. It's just interesting. It's fascinating to see. The second piece is I go over to the values on the left side of the screen. This is a great opportunity to talk about those first couple in particular, self-help and self-responsibility. A big piece of this member economic participation is, I describe it as we're pooling our nickels and dimes and pennies together within our community. And so it's our neighbors, it's our friends, it's our family, and we're doing that for our common benefit. So when you think about when somebody gets in a financial challenge or a financial situation, it's your neighbors and it's your family that's helping you along, right? And the power and importance of self-help, self-responsibility, those things, that if you have a loan and you're struggling a bit, and it's your neighbors and it's your family members and it's your community that's provided that loan to you, you're going to do everything you can to pay it back, right? And so that's a really cool thing to think about, that self-help and responsibility in this model. And then as far as the access to the services and all of those things too, I think that's a really powerful one that's enabled because of this third cooperative principle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then so just moving on to the fourth principle of autonomy and independence. What that means is that this is a business that's owned and controlled, benefits individuals, households, actually sometimes small, it can be a co-op of small businesses. It's not a government entity. It's not an arm of, some other entity, typically some type of government entity. It's an independent and autonomous group that's focused on the needs of those individuals. And so that's in the United States, that's not as in question, but in some places over time and over geography, it gets a little bit more questionable. And so as an international statement, just make it really clear that that this is a business that has the priorities of its members, and it's not, some kind of front for some other kind of thing. I'm not sure if anybody else has comment on that one.
The one piece I would add, just like on this one, we're also heavily regulated, right? So a lot of the cooperative industries are also regulated. So autonomy and independence, sometimes I think consumers could interpret that as running fast and loose with their money or whatever, right? So we can kind of do whatever we want, right? Mm-hmm. So what I want to stress and reinforce too is within credit unions, you still have the full faith and backing of the federal government as far as people's money is safe and it's secure up to the limits, and it's heavily regulated. And within that framework of regulation is a lot of autonomy and independence to serve their members in unique ways. And that's one of the cool things is, if you have one credit union and you've seen one, right? And they all operate differently, just like our co-ops, they all have common bonds and similarities, and they also uniquely serve their communities and their members in ways that others might not, because of that autonomy and independence.
And I would just add, building on that too, is when we're out working in communities, I think one of the more attractive things is knowing that everybody's equal in share. So kind of going back to that democratic member control too, is that if the three of us owned a co-op together, all three of us would have that equal. No one of us has a controlling factor on us, right? And so I think that that's it. And when we talk about like how they are not for profits or that they are a business, we are focusing on the membership needs first and foremost, and that has always been an attractive component to the communities that we're in working with. Is just that, wait, we're going to create something that is truly ours, that is truly belonging to the community, and I as an individual have a say in it if I'm a member. And I think that that's a really powerful component of number 4.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, Tracy. The fifth cooperative principle is we're in some ways we're expressing it right now. It's so important for cooperatives that they have it as one of the the very few, only 7 cooperative principles: education, training, and information. So that means it means kind of 2 big different things, and one is that as a member of a co-op, you have the opportunity, and the co-op has the responsibility of providing members information about their co-op and about the cooperative business model. So that's kind of baked in. The other thing is education and training also means that it's incumbent upon us to make sure that others, and perhaps, depending on kind of the orientation, and perhaps especially policymakers, understand what co-ops are and what co-ops do. They are, as this this session here today is making clear, they're a unique thing, and so we have to be really deliberate consistently to make sure that people understand how unique, and how these co-ops can get different outcomes. So education, training, and information. So other folks have thoughts on this?
I would just say that this is the one of the 7 guiding principles that I think is in state law across all of our sectors. I'm not sure how it's worded, Gary, in the credit unions, but it is pretty much in there. And actually, in the cooperative associations, the one that we're seeing such a tremendous growth in, it actually is that there is a set aside specifically within your net revenue for education training. It's wrote in the law. So I think that just shows the importance of it. And then the impact of like our organizations working together to provide those different educations.
Yeah, the piece I would add is to that on the credit union side, and I'm sure it's true in others as well. You mentioned the law, there's also the regulation. And in regulations for credit unions, there's a fiduciary educational component for the board of directors, right? They're volunteer boards in Montana. And so they're volunteers. And so volunteers, if you're a teacher's credit union, your board is made up of teachers. Teachers might not fully understand all of the nuances of finance and things like that. And so there's a responsibility, since they're wearing a fiduciary hat for their credit union and other co-ops, that they have that education and training. The other piece I would mention, I loved how you both talked about the role and power of advocacy and advocacy in a lot of ways is education. It's also awareness. And we use advocacy big A and advocacy little a, right? Advocacy big A is just what you described, going in and making sure our lawmakers and others fully understand that credit unions and co-ops are different. The little a is awareness, public and consumer awareness, right? A lot of studies, we talked about 1 in 3 Americans are members of co-ops. How many of them know they're a member of a co-op and would specifically say they're a member of co-op? It might be a little bit less than that. And so I think part of our role too is to raise consumer awareness across the state and around the country on that. And then the role of education that credit unions and co-ops play in their communities. We talked about this with this credit union yesterday evening I mentioned, is what is our responsibility to help educate around co-ops, and in our particular world around finance for young people, as an example. Young people, as they're graduating and moving on, what is their role with money, and do they understand that? And there's a new mandate for our schools, starting with this incoming year of seniors, that they have a financial education component, and it's required in the schools. So I think there's a great opportunity for co-ops, as an example. We can help support our schools and our teachers through education and training along those ways. And then, Tracy, I'll do a plug for the Co-op Academy too, that fits in here. If I may just take, Doug, I'm taking a little more time here, but if I may. So Tracy had a vision to bring all co-ops together to provide a co-op academy or co-op education and awareness on what is a co-op, and just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, why is a co-op? And so the first cohort launched earlier this spring, and it had representatives from all the co-ops, and it was an immersion into the cooperative world. And at the end, there were case studies of real live communities in Montana that are facing challenges and facing problems. And Doug, you mentioned in your opening that co-ops are formed to solve problems. And so many of our communities are struggling in Montana, just to be frank. And so co-ops can solve for those. And so in the Co-op Academy, case studies were provided to the groups, and they had to solve for those problems in their real problems and real communities across our state. And they had to solve for those problems using co-ops as much as possible. And it was encouraging and enlightening to see that the groups came up with really good ways that co-ops could come together to solve these problems that our communities have. So I think we have a privilege, of course, in this. I also feel that we have a responsibility for education, training, and information for our communities, for our members, our boards, consumers at large, legislators, all the groups.
Absolutely.
Got a little soapboxy on that one, Tracy. Sorry.
No, I
I'm
think it was
passionate about this one.
good. You do love the Co-op Academy, and I love it because I think you talk more about it than I do, and I think that's really cool. So Doug had to step aside. Looks like he had to find a new location, so he's actually at a Federation of the Southern Co-ops right now. So going into our our sixth one is cooperation amongst co-ops, and I think that's what we're showing right now, right, Gerry? Is our relationship, the way that the four associations that serve Montana, the way that we work together, but really cooperation amongst co-ops is just that. That's what it means. It means that cooperatives should and will support each other. We're seeing a lot of mentorship happening with our newer co-ops merging. We're kind of building up this opportunity that they can talk to existing ones through either the Montana Council of Co-ops gatherings or through the Co-op Academy or things like that. Gerry, what does this one mean to you?
This one, it's kind of like your children, right? We love them all, and maybe one is our favorite in the moment, right? So in the moment, Principle 6 or P6, you often hear this said. This is really high on the list for me. I believe strongly in collaboration, the power of doing things together. I think we're so much stronger when we're together. So what this means to me, and what I feel our co-ops and co-op sectors in Montana have done, probably the last 2 to 2.5 years in particular, is come together to talk about our common needs and our common interests. Where I saw it play out, not only in the Co-op Academy that we just talked about, also at the legislative session. So this past spring was our legislative session for the state of Montana, and we had some bills that were favorable to co-ops, and we had some that were unfavorable to co-ops, and we mutually came together across sectors to make sure we understood what those issues were. When we're meeting with our senators and our representatives, we could advocate or represent our common interests as well as our unique interests. And we hosted a legislative luncheon. We hosted some different things that were cross-sector as well. So this is a really important and powerful one. Within a community, we know that housing affordability is a significant issue. We know that childcare is a significant issue. There are so many other things that are issues in our communities that co-ops solve for, and they're doing it independently. And I also think they're starting to come together to do it together. Childcare is a really good one. Our co-ops can come together to offer a cooperative opportunity for childcare that can represent all of our sectors, right? So it helps all of us, and we can do it with efficiencies and probably economies of scale when we do it together. We also could come together on it kind of goes into concern for community, so I'll maybe hold that comment just a little bit. But we also can come together and cooperate among cooperatives for common good. Right. So we might choose a charity of choice or something, or a community organization, and the 4 or 5 co-ops that might be in that community might come together to maximize their impact in that particular community piece. So I think there's lots and lots of opportunities. We could spend the rest of the day talking about ideas and
You
opportunities.
just get so giddy and happy about it when we talk about cooperatives.
Hold me back. I gotta,
Hold Gerry back.
yeah, put a seatbelt on my office chair to keep me in my seat.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I'll jump in on that. Of course, the express in many ways, we are an expression of Principle 6, and over time, over history, when the cooperative community has come together, it has done things that there's no way that they could have done it without coming to. Two quick examples from the federal arena. Just recently, the credit unions were in a big fight that their tax status was kind of up for grabs. There was some proposals in Congress to change the tax status, and it would have been really catastrophic for credit union members and credit unions. We were able at NCBA CLUSA to call upon the other sectors to make sure that we held the line on that co-op tax status, and in Alliance and the credit union community did an amazing job with that, but we were able to ally with them and succeeded. Another was when the around the pandemic came out in March and April of 2020. When it first came out, some of the cooperatives were eligible for this assistance. It's really critical assistance for making sure the businesses could survive through those really tough months. Not all co-ops were eligible. We immediately were able to bring all the co-op sectors together to make the point that everyone needs to be eligible for these. And it meant billions of dollars in tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs that were saved because we came together. Those are just a couple of examples. But yeah, so we'll look at that concern for community is the seventh, and these can kind of, as Gerry suggested, these can melt because when co-ops come together, Principle 6, they can do this for the community that other can't do by themselves. And that might be, solving it can be very local kind of thing where you're solving a particular problem of, getting a park built or, maybe go to the state legislature for some service or some type of thing that the community needs. So that can be, certainly when co-ops work together, but we know, and Gerry talked about it earlier, that when individual co-ops, it's just more likely that they're going to be focused on community priorities because the people who ultimately control that co-op, they live in that community. And those, there's all kinds of examples of how co-ops invest in, in whether it's ball fields or it might be the, making sure that people have access to food, healthcare, other things. So it's in their DNA. Gerry or Tracy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I don't really have a lot more to add to that. I would say what we definitely witness across the state, a lot of the ones forming is based off of some type of a concerns happening in their community. And then what's really exciting to see is when you start seeing those cooperation amongst co-ops and they're watching what's happening in their community and they're starting to address those things together. I will say I started in economic development because the electrical and telecommunication co-op saw a need for their community and created an economic development organization, which is where I started my career off. And we built that organization for a number of years with the two co-ops. So I think that's a good example of real life of how co-ops saw something and addressed it outside of what their service was.
Tracy, I'm going to back up just 1 second for co-op among cooperatives to provide a tangible example in credit unions. So we mentioned that credit unions are local, right? They live, work, and worship in a local community. But what happens when you travel outside of that for vacation or whatever it is, and you need to access an ATM? So credit unions came together years and years ago to form a network, an ATM network, so that they could share each other's ATM networks. So it didn't matter if you're traveling from Bozeman, where I live, to Florida for spring break. you can access an ATM network without all the fees and all the things. And so it actually is the largest ATM network in the country. And it's because of this principle 6, where credit unions came together to pool their resources to provide ATM networks for members across the country, which is really cool. So that's a real good example. On the concern for community, the one piece I would mention that's local to Montana is our support of our children's hospital. Right? We have a children's hospital in Montana that does amazing work. They are actually, there are kids from every county in the state that have benefited from Show Dare Children's Hospital. And so one of the things that credit unions and other co-ops and others have done is kind of chosen that as a very specific concern for community, because it affects our kids, right? And so we've come together in concern for community, and we have raffles, we have competitions, we do different things to support children's hospitals, and specifically Show Dare here in Montana. So that's just a classic example. It kind of ties in principle 6 of cooperation, because all the credit unions across the state do it, and other co-ops, and then concern for community, because that's the beneficiary. And then at the local level, credit unions, just like Doug said and Tracy, you said, credit unions will have local community organizations and nonprofits that they support. And it's not just their money, their employees. Many co-ops provide time for their employees with pay to have hours per month or per year or per quarter to volunteer their time in local nonprofits and nonprofit organizations. And it's really cool to see the impact of that in the community.
So I think that was a great conversation around the 7 guiding principles, and we have a little bit more time. I'm going to move us over into kind of what those ecosystems are for us to kind of briefly touch on those ecosystems around the cooperative community. I would definitely want to leave time for the year of cooperatives, as well as just some question and answer period. So moving us forward, Doug, what's happening on the national ecosystem? Tell us a little bit more about NCBA.
Sure. So, National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International, it's a mouthful, just NCBA. We were established in 1916 for membership for all kinds of cooperatives. So in our membership, we're an association based in Washington, D.C. In our membership is included all of the national sectoral, so America's Credit Unions Association, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, the National Housing Cooperative Association, the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and on and on. They're all members of ours. And then we also have many state leagues. Gary's group is a member of ours, thankfully. That we've got state associations for rural electric co-ops. And then we have individual co-ops and credit unions who are members of ours as well. We do advocacy, we do public awareness, we do thought leadership and development. We've done co-op development and worked with the co-op development community here in the United States. And over the last 70 years, we've worked across the world, actually, helping people empower their lives and capture opportunity by using the cooperative business line. We also, I should mention, we've got cooperative development centers and cooperative associations like MCDC. And that's why we get to have Tracy on our board, which is fantastic. Membership snapshot, super fast. We've got just about every, every sector. There's a few, there's some of those members: Organic Family, Organic Valley, CoBank, Dairy Farmers of America, just from the ag side, and quite a few credit unions, and then co-ops from across the different sectors. We can go next slide.
Oh, I did a fun one there. So.
Oh, look at this. It's coming in slow for me, but this is a map of cooperatives. It's a little dated, but it's very representative. Co-ops are, they're the blue are mostly agriculture cooperatives, and then the red you see are pretty well distributed based on population, and those credit unions. And the green is cooperatives, and you'll see that the rural electric cooperatives, those rural electric and ag are especially prominent in the Midwest and down the South. And in the West, in Montana, there's there's a lot of co-ops. It's, you know, it's somewhat reflected of the, you know, a little bit more sparsely populated areas. So that's just a quick map. Go next slide.
Yeah, so as we're talking about just ecosystems, Gary, myself, the other two associations, which are the Electric Cooperative Association and Broadband MT, we've kind of been working on trying to develop more of a robust ecosystem around our in the state of Montana. And so we do quarterly meetings, so we haven't been great at those, on my fault. And how do we, and Gary, you mentioned this before, how do we kind of keep that communication happening and building this interaction across all co-ops regardless of sector? And that's what the council really is focusing on, is that we're a trade association for any co-op in the state of Montana to join. And we're doing business all across the state of Montana and really opening that dialogue between the different sectors that tend to at times become a little siloed. And we're kind of saying, no, let's all work together and really show this power behind co-ops, because individually we're powerful, but together, I mean, like, are we unstoppable or something like that? Gary, do you want to add anything to our like our ecosystem that we've been building?
The piece I would add, I think, is that we, as we're building that coalition, we're attending and participating in each other's meetings.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool one. So we had a panel, for example, during our fall conference where we invited the sector leaders and Tracy to be on a panel to talk cross-sector collaboration and connections for our members. And it was eye-opening, the dialogue and the Q&A that came from our members, and then the networking that happened during breaks was fascinating. I think it's easy to get in our silos and our bubbles and get heads down with the work that we're doing, and that's fine. And we also should be aware of what's happening around us with other co-ops. And so I think the power of this ecosystem is our doing it together and finding ways to create space for those connections is really important moving forward.
Yeah, I will just add to that, Gary. I think a highlight to my summer travels was when we all gathered at the Bozeman Food Co-op, and we had a representation from almost every sector, and just the dialogue that we had. And then you have like the ag guys talking about how they paid out patronage, and the credit unions and electricals are like, no, that's not how we do it. And then just being able to talk about the difference, but then how much a commonality we had, and at the end of the day, how co-ops really are truly about their members and how we can work together. So going back to those principles is really what we're leaning in on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned, or Doug mentioned, that you are on his board.
Yep.
Going the other direction is we have full support from the National Association in Montana as well. And so last year, Doug was here for your meeting, Tracy, and was a keynote speaker and did other things as well. So we have that connection and that collaboration at the national level, which also includes some international components, as well as our ecosystem here in Montana. So it's good to know that others have our back too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a quick slide kind of showing our members, and one of the things I like to do sometimes is we'll throw in like Ace Hardware or something to really throw people off guard about types of co-ops, because again, I don't think that people realize the vastness of the cooperative community and who all's part of it. Let's move on to Year of Cooperatives. Doug, I do have all of your slides, just given time, if we can just kind of go through them relatively quickly, and we can of course share these slides and the resources with everybody.
Yeah, we'll go real fast. And I suspect that we got some of my colleagues, they'll drop some links into the chat. So 2025 is the year of the co-ops. Why? Because leaders from across the world in late 2023 we're looking for ways to solve some big problems, big challenges that we have around the globe, around hunger, around economic opportunity, around clean water, around housing. And they realize that one of the best strategies are co-ops when people come together. And so we focused on using this year to increase public awareness and increase advocacy. Next slide. We've created a number of deliverables and initiatives. And the first one is around, we released it measuring people's opinion of co-ops, and we found that consumers uniformly, and there's more, I'm not going to get into the numbers, but uniformly, they find that co-ops they're better business citizens. They're better for individuals and they're better for communities. And the numbers are real. A key takeaway is that 67% said cooperatives provide value to consumers. So over 2/3 really find that that's the case. Next slide. I'm going to start going real fast here, Tracy. There we go. Earlier up on the chat, we have a cooperative impact report that we released in February, a great set of national statistics by sector and a great set of stories. If you're looking for ways to understand or to communicate the co-op's impact, that report is there for you. Next slide.
Did it come through for you, Doug? Did Doug disappear on us? Or did I disappear?
Looks like Doug disappeared.
Okay,
Yep,
I
I think
can't
Doug
see everything. So I think, Liz, do you want to add anything? Or Virginia?
Sure, I can hop on. So just following along here, one of the other key things that we've been doing this year in terms of raising public awareness about cooperatives is partnering with a public relations firm, and they've been helping us place some op-eds in some pretty high profile publications across the US. We're actually working on pitching one right now that Tracy authored. Big kudos to her for that. She's talking about the impact of cooperatives in rural America, and why it's important that programs like RCDG are preserved. And so we're looking forward to placement on that, and we can definitely share it with folks on this call when that comes out. Let's go to the next slide, please. Is there a next slide?
Yep. Just your toolkits, I think.
Yeah, okay. So sorry, Kira, if you could grab while I chat here, if you could grab the link. But another engagement opportunity we have this year is our Year of Co-op social media takeover. We launched this in May, and it's basically like a monthly effort where folks can come together and kind of like blast out a co-op message across their social media platforms. We kind of created this campaign to be a learning journey. So it's not necessarily targeting folks who are in the co-op space already, but it's really focusing on our followers who are in our community that we're trying to get that co-op message to. So it takes folks on a learning journey of, what a cooperative is, what sectors they're active in, how they impact their local economies. And this is all going to culminate in October during co-op month. And so just definitely encourage folks to jump on board with this. Let me look at my calendar really quickly. Our next opportunity to engage in this is actually going to be August 27th. So it's the fourth Wednesday of every month. So yeah, would love to have you guys on board, and we'll be sharing out our posts. You're welcome to repost. You're welcome to pull the resources from that toolkit Kira shared. Thank you so much, Kira. And we have like messaging prompts and hashtags and everything that you need to kind of jump into this campaign. Next slide. Okay, I'm actually going to hand this to Virginia and Kira because they are our membership team and will definitely be more articulate on the P6 membership surge.
Hey, thanks, Liz. Yes, so the P6 membership surge, right now we have a great promotion going on that, we're always looking to recruit new members, but as we've learned, P6 here, we are stronger together. So for this particular promotion, any cooperative that's already a member of a national association or some other association that's a member of us can get a 50% discount on membership. So for example, food co-ops that are members of National Co-op Grocers, they can join for a 50% discount, not just for 2025, but 50% off for 2026 as well. If a credit union is a member of America's Credit Unions, which is a member of ours, they'll also get a 50% discount. And so it's a really great offer and way that we're trying to leverage, you know, our community. And yeah, and so that's coming at least through the Impact Conference this October.
Yeah. So yeah, please take advantage of that. Sorry, I have some technical to the point. Both Montana's credit unions as well as Montana Co-op Development Association, they're members of ours. So if you're a member of theirs, you can have 50% off. So let us know. We'd love to have you be part of the NCBA CLUSA family.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have been pushing that out for everybody. And then just from our viewpoint, we are kind of gearing up. We always do a smaller splash of co-op month in October, but our team's kind of gearing up to make it a little bit more with some op-eds, leaning on to the toolkits that NCBA's created. Outreach, we would appreciate if anybody has any news channels that they want us to connect us with those. And then we have information about the cooperative community as a whole in Montana that will create and get out in kind of a specialized toolkit for co-ops in Montana as well. Gerry, did you want to say anything on that, kind of as we're facing or getting closer to that month and the end of the year?
Justin, I'm excited to get plugged in with it as well with our credit unions across the state. So that's great. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for your leadership in this.
So that is kind of the overall of our presentation. I would welcome any questions. We have a few minutes if there were any. Thank you to the NCBA team for all your chats and connections or putting all those resources in the chat box. That was very helpful and very exciting to see. Do we have any questions? Are you seeing any questions? Yeah, I am speaking at the Impact Conference. Yay!
Mm-hmm.
That's when the way that Doug kind of is like, hey, you want to do this? And we're like, okay, I guess we're doing this. Awesome. Well, Doug or Gerry, would you have any last moments of wisdom or anything that you guys want to share as we wrap up?
I would just encourage and challenge everyone on the call just to get plugged in to obviously your own co-op, of course. And if you're exploring co-ops, do the research, the toolkits that have been provided today. Tracy and her team do an amazing job at helping to form co-ops, helping to develop co-ops and all those things. And then if you are already a co-op, see what you can do to learn about the other co-ops that are in your local area and reach out to them and have a cup of coffee or set up lunch and just start the dialogue. I'll call it the P6 dialogue, right? Something that Tracy and Doug both are, it's in their DNA to create these spaces for dialogue. So I challenge anyone and all of us on the call to reach out to our co-op friends across the state, across town. We've got several of them here in Bozeman. And so just those connections are important.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. I think all I will end with is thank you, Tracy. Thank you, team at Montana Co-op Development Center. It's a great opportunity to connect with the co-ops in the community of Montana, and we look forward to staying engaged and supporting you and your work in the individual co-op. So happy year of the co-op.
Yes, happy year of the co-op. Thank you again, Gerry and Doug, for joining us. NCBA team for being so awesome behind the scenes. Lindsay is also behind the scenes, but she didn't even turn on her camera. So a shout out to her for organizing for us. And just thank you, everyone. We will do a follow-up email with a link to this and resources. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.